All right. Good morning. Thank you for inviting me to your research symposium. My name is Paul A.J. Foyt. The AJ comes from one of my first days working in civilian EMS. I was driving an ambulance and got pulled over for driving too fast. So Paul Foyt forever become AJ Foyt after that since, and that was in 1992. So it's been a really long time. So I've been in healthcare for about 30 years, working as a paramedic, nurse, mostly working in private EMS, emergency room nursing. I did a little stint with MedFlight HealthNet as a flight nurse slash medic. Currently, I do most my work is through education, teaching paramedicine and some nursing. I still maintain a position there in emergency department. So today we're coming to discuss uh, an effort to improve cardiac arrest survival through research, through collection of data, processing of data, sharing back of feedback. This has been really important to me ever since I even started in the field, because I kind of love to gain knowledge. One of the things I always love to do is the American Heart Association puts out a brand new ACLS book about every 6 years. And I've always kind of loved to read through that and read the fine print, because if you read the fine print on that ACLS book, you'll really discover that, well, some of the things we think we know and our hard principles are actually not really that hard principles. There's actually a lot of gaps in there, a lot of information. And though I think we are getting better through research, I wanted to launch our own research project, something that's a little bit more local. So what I did was I recruited my wife, and for years I've been saying I want to get this research project up and launched. So uh, it took a lot of convincing. She's really good at data collection, helping me to process things and get it ready to go. So that we definitely got this underway about 2020. Now, one of the things that kind of sparked me to do that is several times in my career, I've had that did I do that moment, where basically something that I took as a basic principle was suddenly questioned or even totally debunked by a class that I took or by an article that I read. And I give an example of this. When I went through my initial medic class way back in 1990, one of the things that we were taught is that with stroke care, that if you go on scene, you give everyone 100% oxygen. If their blood pressure was high, you put a little needle into a precardia and pop it under the tongue, and you lower their blood pressure as fast as possible. And then, if there was any question at all whether their sugar was up or down, you just give an AMPA D50 and you let it sort it out. Well, I was sitting in a class about 2009 with MedFlight for an advanced stroke life support class. And all of a sudden, I found out that the three worst things that you could do for a stroke was exactly those. All of a sudden, it come to made me question all of my basic knowledge. And right then and there, I knew something. I was going to be a lifelong learner. If you think you got this field under control and you think you got your grips on what is right, and then all of a sudden, the next thing you know, the big name major movement totally switches it out. Cardiac care is the same way. Everyone got a non-rebreather. Now we find out it's actually pretty bad to put a cardiac patient on non-rebreather unless they absolutely need it. So I decided that, again, I want to do my own research. I want to kind of get down to what does it take in order to make best practices. So here's some statistics by the AHA. Every year, between 324 and 424,000 people will go into cardiac arrest and out of hospital situation. Yearly, that's the survival rate is about 9.5 to 12%. And this is according to the American Heart Association. But when you look really at the fine print, you find out that there's actually a variable range from there, as little as 2%, like in Chicago. And then you got over here in Ronaldo, California, as high as 44, 46%. And I kind of begin questioning, where do we sit in Scioto County? Where are we at right here? So again, that was another question I really kind of wanted to answer. How do we sit on this, this large range? Are we right in the middle? Or are we closer to one end or the other? I was praying and hopefully that we would be closer to, of course, that 46%. So some of the things that I think of maybe why there's such a disparity is these five things: 911 access, CPR, AED, ACLS, and hospital. And these are the five things that come burning to my mind. Maybe these are different here than they would be in some of these other places. So 911 access, I want to know, when people are they witnessing, unwitnessing? Do we have a higher percentage of unwitnessed here? Do we have 911 access? Do we have a longer length of time before I can get an ambulance there? Once we get an ambulance there, does it take us longer to get to the hospital? Those are the kind of things that I was looking for, and I thought maybe some variables. With CPR, I wanted to know, do we have the equal bystander CPR and family CPR that is in progress when EMS arrives, or are we lesser on that scale. So I wanted to know that. AED use, no, I don't think anyone had ever recorded. Are we using AEDs in the field? Do we have them? Do we not have them? You know, and does places like Renato, California, do they have greater AED deployment? So those are some of the questions that I wanted to know. And then when it comes to ACLS, I wanted to really dig down deep into this. I wanted to know, IV access versus IO access. I wanted to know this drug versus that drug. Does no drugs help? I wanted to know exactly what my data would show. And then also things like advanced airway, intubation, LMAs, the Kings, those kind of things. And there are a variety of different airway adjuncts that could be utilized. And does one of them kind of stand out and saying, this is the tool to use? This is the best thing. And then the hospital, my research doesn't dig deep in here. I do record a lot of things, but I wanted to know, is there best practices being deployed? And is there a way that I can record those best practices, maybe to show some information on that backside? So when I started looking for the 2020 AHA data, I really kind of looked and saw a similarity in what they call their chain of survival and what my variables. And so they actually kind of almost correlate directly out. If you look, we got things like 911 access, high quality CPR, defibrillation. We got the advanced ACLS, the hospital care, and then of course the recovery, which is the newest chain that they added onto there. Getting those people from the hospital back into their homes, that was going to be key. And this again, this is the 2020 AHA chain of survival. So we talk about survival. It's kind of funny. I wanted to know how our survival rates were, but first I had to define what survival was going to be. If I ask a paramedic, what is survival? A paramedic will tell you absolutely, if I got in the hospital alive or they come back when they got in the hospital, woo, we won. But then you ask an ER nurse that, and the ER nurse says, no, a lot of them do die. They may get a pulse back in the field, but when they get to here, they're dead. And then I ask an ER nurse, well, what's your, view of survival? And they say, hey, if I got in the ICU, it's all their problem now. No, I don't think so. Then I ask ICU nurses, and they're more kind of distinct about this. They say, survival is actually when we get a person up here, we take care of them, we make them better, and we get them discharged home. So when I talk about survival rates, I'm talking about those people who come in cardiac arrest and they go home alive. Now, there is some variables about, what they're like on the way home, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So I come up with a PICO question. In a rural community, can a cardiac arrest registry identify modifiable variables to enhance survival over a year? Now, one of the key concepts I understood with this is that I was going to have to find a way to make some measurements, because if you want to improve something, you have to be able to measure it out and then make a change and then measure it out again and make a change so that we can see what we're doing. And that's kind of what led to this quality improvement project. Basically, we take some measurements, and I like to get as many variables as I could, as I described to you before. I like to benchmark them, see where those compared to everywhere else. Especially, I wanted to know, how do we compare to that 2% versus that 46% way up there? I wanted to know where we sit at with them. And then I kind of give feedback into our EMS agencies and let them know, hey, this is some of the things that other places are doing that maybe we're not. And, this is some of the things that I've noticed. Hopefully then that they can make some changes and that we could remeasure. And then every single year we'll kind of roll with this, make this better and better and better. So as I told you, I was planning this for years and years and years. And it happened to be fate that I went to a medical directors conference in Central Ohio with the SMC. And when I was there, the state of Ohio EMS were presenting this new thing called CARES, and it stood for a cardiac arrest registry to enhance survival. This was a tool that we could use to enter data, process data, give us feedback. And I thought to myself, wow, man, this is fate. I've been talking about doing this for years, and suddenly here it all comes to me as this lands right in my lap, an awesome tool that I can use. And then it comes down to, how am I going to pay for it? Because there's money involved here. Luckily, the state of Ohio has decided, and they are currently paying for all the fees that are with this registry. So as the deal is, as long as I keep putting data in and keep correcting it and keep working with it, the state of Ohio and the Board of EMS are going to help me pay for it. So that's an awesome thing. It also has some funding from some other various agencies. You see some big names here like American Red Cross, American Heart Association, Emory University, Medtronic, and the CDC. Before they had some budget cuts, they were even funding into here too, in order to keep this going. Emory University is kind of the big person. They kind of keep the registry, make the updates, store the information, so that they do help quite a bit. So how does it work? Well, I collect the data and I enter it in through a web-based application, and it processes the information for me. It makes it very efficient. It puts it in reports. And what this does is it helps us to identify strengths and weaknesses that we need in order to improve our care. And more importantly, it doesn't just help us identify those strengths and weaknesses, it helps us to benchmark them so we can see exactly where we sit right at this particular moment in time. We can make changes and see if we can make improvements. That's going to be key. On the map here, you'll see a list of all the states that are currently willing to fund any EMS agency inside the blue states here are, if you're a member of one of these blue states and you're looking for, to start your own CARES program, your own research project, all these states do comply. And those municipalities that you see there that are kind of marked out, those are ones that are, maybe a county or a city is coming in and saying, hey, we're going to pay for that too. We don't really think there's value here. And the AHA come out in their 2020 guidelines and basically said, hey, we believe that every EMS agency and hospital can really benefit from tracking and recording their EMS and their hospital data on cardiac arrest in a registry for better benchmarking and measuring. Now, how it works is it's basically a software and it's web-based. It can take information in through electronic medical records from hospitals, EMS units, dispatch. I mean, there's a lot of different things it can pull it into. But with us, we have so many different EMS agencies in SOTA County. It's all really hand entered with us. We have to get the run sheets, identify the patients, collect the electronic medical record from the hospital, and enter it all in. It is HIPAA compliant and NMSIS compliant, so it does kind of help to smooth out those rough edges. That was definitely a stickler with the IRB that I had to go through in order to start this research, that I was going to be able to keep the patient data safe and out of the hands that we don't want it to be in. Some of the things that it does, it helps me to make reports, and I have literally, if you could see my desk, you would see I have tons and tons and tons of data. I can extrapolate data on, whether the person had hypertension and their likelihood of dying. I could tell, if they had, a history of coronary artery disease, what percentage of survivals was. I mean, there's a lot of different things that I can get there, as long as response times, patient demographics, what age was most likely to die or most likely to survive. I mean, I can extrapolate all that out if I want to. But the main report that they use is something called an Utstein survival report. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. I even have an example. And what that really does is it helps us to compare apples to apples, oranges to oranges when we talk about this. Because remember, when you're collecting data from cardiac arrest, there's so many variables. I mean, patient's health entering in, patient's health coming out. I mean, where they were, what happened, the cause. And this really does kind of help me to extrapolate that data, sort it out so that I have different things in different places, and I'm really able to kind of pull down the information that we need. Now, some of the things I collect from the EMS, I collect the patient's demographics, name, date of birth, those kind of things, patient medical record, all those things are actually recorded into the database. And then what happens is at a 3-month mark, they come in, they audit my information, they validate it, they make sure that I've done it right. And then they scrub the identifiers, name, date of birth, all that stuff is scrubbed out so that when I get my pure data out, I'm not able to identify anything like that. They just use that more for quality control. I collect information about the patient's arrest, where did it happen at, how close they were to 911, who witnessed it, whether it was healthcare, EMS, family members, bystanders. I collect all that. And then when we start the resuscitation process, I collect things on who started CPR, was an AED used, was dispatch information given. I collect all these different pieces, including what initial cardiac rhythm, if I can find that in the run sheet or, from any of the witnesses that were there. I try to pull out as much information as I can from that. Once they get en route, I look at when was the code terminated? When did we stop? Or if the person got, return of spontaneous circulation, I collect that piece. Return of spontaneous circulation, for those of you who've worked codes, that occasionally, we might get a pulse back momentarily. For the purpose of this research, and it's clearly defined by the CARES program, they only wanted us to record ROSC as being a person who gained a pulse back for greater than 20 minutes in a row. So the people who got a pulse back and lost a pulse, got a pulse back, or were kind of questioning it, those were not included in ROSCs. Hospital arrival, whether they're in cardiac arrest when they arrive or got a pulse. And then from there, we kind of start gathering hospital data. Now, one of the things that CARES does ask about is whether we started hypothermia in the field. But in our region, we follow the AHA principles, and actually the AHA in 2016 came out and said that they didn't recommend the use of a hypothermia protocol in the field. It just was too laborsome, too much equipment required, and it just wasn't getting done properly. So therefore, we kind of stopped doing that. At the hospital, I collect the ER outcome. Did they survive to make it to the floor? Did they get to hospice? Were they, in one case, discharged home? I kind of look for that piece of information. I record whether we did hypothermia or some other advanced procedures. Like with hypothermia or target temperature management, I also look to see if they got taken to a cath lab, maybe a stent placed or angioplasty, if they went to emergency surgery. Those kind of data points are all entered in. Then I look at the hospital outcome and discharge. What we're looking for is, what happened? Did this person move from ICU to rehab and then to home? They make it from ICU to hospice, or what happened to them. And more importantly, after that, we kind of look to see what kind of neurological outcome they had. What we do is we use a cerebral perfusion category, which is a scale of 1 to 4. And category number 1 is somebody who, cardiac arrest, they survive and they walk out with all their functioning ADLs. So they're able to go home, they take care of themselves in those. A CPC of 2 would be somebody who has minor ADL problems, might need a little bit of help, maybe buttoning a shirt, those kind of things, but for the most part are okay. And ADL 3, or I'm sorry, a CPC of 3 is somebody who has, they're massive problems. They've got lots of ADL issues. They're maybe confined in a wheelchair. They need help with everything. And these are probably the ones that are going to be sent home with advanced care, like home care, or they're going to be placed in a nursing facility for higher quality of care. And the CPC of 4 is basically somebody who is comatized. They do have vital times, they're maintaining their own pulse and those kind of things, but they're basically comatose. Now, once I get that, this is a copy of what I call the Utstein report. And what happens is, if you kind of see, all the little data points are kind of extrapolated out. And if you this actual report is actually 3 different pages, by the way. If you take this report, an Utstein report from, let's say, a Soda County EMS, and I can pull this on all of our EMS as a whole or individual EMSs, so I can tell the difference between like Portsmouth Ambulance and Portsmouth Fire. And Porter Township, those I can pull all that data from. But if you would take this and you lay this side by side with different ambulances or with the nation, you can definitely compare apples to apples. And what's kind of cool about this is actually internationally accepted as a way of reporting the outcomes for cardiac arrests and survival. So what happens is you can compare this to the information they're getting from France, Great Britain, Germany. All those different countries are using this exact report so that we can actually really kind of dig down deep and say, where do we need to make changes? So this has probably been one of our most beneficial reports. So let's get down to my information. In 2020, we recorded 195 cardiac arrests, 195. To be honest with you, I was kind of thinking that we would probably see 220 to 250. That's probably where I was guessing at. So we're on a low side, even for a pandemic year, according to what I thought we would see. There was some that did not make my criteria for research. So therefore, I kind of extrapolated those out and didn't include them in the final numbers. But I did collect and watch and travel through and watch their outcomes. So we have many, many EMS agencies in Soda County. And I got all of them to basically sign a agreement that I was okay for me to track their data. Now, according to the state of Ohio, I didn't really need that. I could have gone through and just collected their data and kind of twisted their arms to help give me information. But I kind of felt like it's better to get flies with sugar than it is with vinegar. So I had only 2 EMS agencies, and these were really small EMS agencies that didn't participate. And of that, those 4 had 4 of the 195 cardiac arrests come from them. They unfortunately had 0 survival rate, and they have such long response times to the scene and back. It's no wonder. I mean, they live way out there. Now, amazingly, we had 4 patients arrive to the hospital in cardiac arrest who actually come in by private auto. Now, this actually has the highest survival rate. I'm not for sure I can explain why, but of the 4 people who showed up to SMCER in cardiac arrest in their vehicles, one out of four of those actually lived to have the highest actually survival. They beat the national average by almost double. So, that's pretty impressive there. There is some variables there too. To dig in deeper. Any run that originated in Kentucky was either Greenup County or Lewis County. Due to the way I did my IRB, I was not able to include them in my criteria, but I did track them, and they had a 7.1 survival rate. 7.1. So that's actually, when you're looking at the nation, it's not too bad. That's not too bad. So what happened was I started looking a little bit deeper, and I found out that roughly 9 of these cardiac arrests actually didn't arrest in a pre-hospital setting. They really couldn't count in my data. Instead, they coded after EMS got to the hospital, and there was 9 of those, and we had 11% survival rate on those patients. All right, so let's get down to my data. So when you look at my data, we saw 162 patients. The average age was 59 years old. Now, I kind of thought that was pretty young. I really looked into this, and I thought, man, I wonder what's causing that number to be so young. As I approach 50, it kind of scares me a little bit. And we do have, a very high rate of overdose deaths that are occurring in our community. And as a matter of fact, right now, the number one killer of anyone under the age of 50 actually is going to be, from 18 to 50, that is going to be drugs and alcohol. 43% of those were female, 57% male. The majority of these occurred in private residences. 18% occurred in nursing homes, and there was less than 1% that occurred in places like streets, public recreation areas, and those kind of things. And I think that number was kind of low in 2020, mostly because those areas were actually closed due to COVID. So I think when my net data comes back next year, I think I'll have a little bit more categories in this particular case. Of that 54%, we had, or 162, I'm sorry, we had 5.4% survival rate. 5.4 survival rate. Well, I already kind of told you the national average, ranges anywhere, from 9.5 to 12, but I was kind of depressed. I thought 5.4, I thought we would be a little bit higher. Now, the good thing is I went back and I compared the 2020 data for the nation. And here's the 2 numbers that I got. According to CARES, of all the cardiac arrests entered into the registry across the United States, there's roughly an 8.8 survival rate. And American Heart Association kind of shotgunned it from the hip there, and they said they thought it was going to be roughly about 10%. So if you kind of look at us, our survival rate is roughly about, unfortunately, half, maybe a little over half of what the nation, compared to the nation. So we are closer to that 2% than that 46%. So, on one side looking at it, we got a lot of variables that we need to identify and hopefully be able to change to improve our outcomes. Now, I didn't want to look at this kind of morbidly at what we were doing wrong. Instead, I wanted to look and see what we were doing right for this presentation. So I really focused in on that 5.4% that made it out of the hospital. And I found out that their actually average age was 74, which is kind of weird because the 59 is the lower age. I thought we'd see more survivors in the lower age range, but we didn't. They were higher. Most of them were male, 88%. When it comes to home or nursing homes, there was much higher increase in nursing home survival rates. And I think that may have to do with probably, if I had to guess, I would say that the chances of them always kind of being witnessed or more obviously witnessed. So when I took these chain of survival, when I look back to my original questions about, all the variables that may occur in the HA chain of survival, I want to start breaking down these survivors and look at the different parts, like the 911 access, the CPR, AED, ACLS. I want to kind of break it down so that I could understand a little bit better, maybe how these variables contribute in order to me get some information out. So I looked at EMS activation. Now, this is something that I looked for. I wanted to know what percentage was witnessed versus unwitnessed. Now, obviously, unwitnessed cardiac arrests have a higher potential for bad outcomes. The reason why is who knows how long they were down for before 911 was activated. So when I look at the nation, and this is how we're going to read these, if you look to if you're looking at the screen to the far left there, that 50%, that column there will stand for what we see in the United States according to CARES compared to everyone else. The middle column is what we see for the average cardiac arrest that occurred in DeSoto County. And on the far right, we see our survivors. So kind of reading this, 50% of cardiac arrests that occur in the United States are unwitnessed. Now, if you look at overall in DeSoto County, we're right real close to it, 48%. But if you look at the survivors, most of those were witnessed. Only 25% were unwitnessed. So that plays a key part in this. Knowing when someone goes down and and activating 911 is going to be an important part. The next thing is I want to know kind of, did EMS witnessing it? You know, when EMS got on scene, if they went to cardiac arrest, did that help to increase their survival rate? One of the things I found out, and of all the cardiac arrests that occurred in the nation, only 13% of them are witnessed by EMS. And the all SoDa County, 20% was, and all the survivors, 25% of them was actually witnessed in front of EMS. Now, one of the things I think in SoDa County, why our EMS witnessed probably a little bit more cardiac arrest, is because we have such long transport times. You know, if you think about let's say Columbus Fire. Columbus Fire has a hospital probably about every, 20, 30 blocks. So their response times are going to be 4 or 5 minutes from the time they pick up a patient, time they get to, definitive care. But if you look at us, we have sometimes over an hour, 40 minutes to an hour response time from the scene to the hospital. And this might be places like in Lewis County, Kentucky. If you look at Raritan, Nile Township, Vernon, South Webster, some of those guys got really, really, really long transport times that just leaves it open for about anything to happen. All right, so response times. I mean, I really thought this was a silver bullet. I thought when I started pulling data that I would be able to show that in SoDa County, we don't have enough ambulances strategically placed in order to meet response times. So I pulled the national data and I found out that the average response time from the station to the scene is about 7 minutes. Oh, surely we got places that could be worse than that. So I pulled our data and I found out that the average cardiac arrest response time in SoDa County was 6.3 minutes. We actually had less of a response time. And then I kind of pulled the data on the survivors. I thought, well, surely the survivors would have, only a 2 or 3 minute response time. They're the ones that we saved. No, 6.1. So really, to be honest with you, in the research, what I thought was going to be kind of a standout really didn't kind of stand out. We're actually getting ambulances on scene, and kudos to our EMS agencies in town. I mean, we're getting out the door, we're getting on scene, and we're getting things going. So this is maybe a reason for a pat on the back to our local EMS agencies. We are getting there. So I asked about CPR. One of the things was, are we having bystander CPR prior to EMS arrival? And if you look at the nation, we see that 40.1% of all codes where EMS arrive, CPR is in progress. They're either bystander, a family member, a healthcare professional, somebody is actually pushing on that chest. And then I look at us in SoDa County. Well, it's kind of no wonder if CPR is so important, why these patients, we have half the survival rate, because we actually have half the CPR rates. We're roughly 20.4%, which means 1 out of every 5 codes actually has somebody that's actually working the code prior to us getting there. But look at the survivors. Ain't that interesting? 88% of the people who lived had CPR underway before EMS got there. So I think this validates how important CPR can be. And we have a lot of ways that we can improve this. I think a big thing that we could do is we could start, mandating that our dispatchers at our county, city, local, private companies, maybe they assist with dispatch instructions. Tell somebody how to, locate a pulse, no pulse, locate their hand positioning, push hard and fast, 1 and 2 and 3. I think even something like that may, chest compressions only type CPR may actually really stand out, and it's hard to save lives. And I do, in my research, I'm able to kind of put that down and, ask what kind of CPR we're doing. Are we doing full CPR? Are we doing just bystander CPR that's, not professional? Are we doing hands only? I do look for those pieces of data if I can find them in the run sheets. But I think one of our biggest things is we definitely need to get community CPR classes underway. I think we need to be at every function, at every fair, at every festival. I think we need to be there showing people how to do CPR. And we're going to need a lot of people to help do that. So I think that's going to be key. If you look at Ronaldo, California, they're really close. That 46% survival rate, they have CPR underway 80% of the time when they arrive on scene, 80% of the time. So you can't tell me that CPR is not important when you got a place like Ronaldo, California with a 44, 46% survival rate that has literally 4 out of every 5 codes being worked prior to you getting there. That's going to be key. There is some new changes that are occurring. In 2016, the AHA did some research and they wondered what percentage of a code EMS actually spent doing good quality CPR. And one of the things they found out was it's only about 50%. So, we spend 50% of a code not doing CPR. en route to a hospital. So there is some new devices that are coming online, and these are some automated CPR devices. And what we see here, we have the AutoPulse, the Lucas in the middle, and the Thumper to the far left. And what these do is basically they take your compression fraction ratio and they just boost it from 50% to 100%. So we're really hoping that as we get more of these devices into our field, that we're going to see a greater outcome, a greater improvement in those outcomes. And luckily, in the end of 2020, a lot of EMS agencies in the Sauter County region began to purchase these. So we had places like Clay Township, Rosemount. They spent $30,000 for 2 different units. So there's a lot of money there. We had Porter Township, Minford, Squad 2, Portsmouth Fire. All of these agencies have started purchasing these pieces of equipment, all to help kind of improve their outcomes. All right, so the next question comes to AED. I wanted to know pre-arrival in the country and in Sauter County, what was the prevalence of the AED use? I found out across the country 9%, but unfortunately in 2020 we had absolutely no AED deployments, none. That kind of a blow. Now that comes from multiple reasons. Number one, we don't have a wide disbursement of AEDs when we need them. And whether we're using them correctly or not, that's the next thing. We got to get out there and get people educated. One of the good things though, in January and February of 2021, we had 2 AED employments, and both of those had positive outcomes. So I know in 2021, we started turning that data around a little bit, and hopefully we carry that through the rest of 2021 into 2022. One of the questions I ask is, does the patient have a shockable rhythm? Are they in VFib or VTAC? The reason why we ask that is because VFib and VTAC tend to have better outcomes than PEA or systole. So across the nation, 16.5% of people were in a shockable rhythm when EMS arrived. In Sauter County, only 13.2. But if you look at our survivors, 50% were in a shockable rhythm when we got there. And that makes a huge, huge difference. And the earlier we get there and the earlier we defibrillate, the better the outcome is. We do know that. All right, so AEDs, what is our big hurdle to get there? Well, it happens to be that they're $1,100 to $1,700 a piece. So, and then they need constant updates. They need, paddles and things like that expire. So we need to do, there needs to be a little bit of money there. But I think back to what happened in Lawrence County a few years ago. If you remember, there's that little boy was playing on a ball field, and he suddenly went down in an acute cardiac arrest. And the doctor said if there's an AED there, that he could have been successfully resuscitated. Well, his mom and a few other people went on a big campaign, and kudos to them. But they have literally now have an AED at every ball field in Lawrence County, every place of recreation. I mean, they literally have been putting those in. So we can have that opportunity to do something like that. We just got to get the power behind us to do it. All right. All right. So the next thing comes to ACLS. And this is the part where I probably begin to lose some people, because those of you who've had ACLS in the past, you may see some things that you believe were tried and true, that this is the ultimate truth, and there is no way around it. If you think about a code and you've ever seen a code work, that they're doing CPR, but they're focusing on medicines. Well, this is going to surprise you. All right, 75% of the people who lived to walk out of the hospital from Sauter County had no medicines at all. 75% of them. All right. The other 25% only had one single medication, and that medication was epinephrine. They received no other medications. So you kind of look at that piece of information, you go, wow, that can't be right. His research got to be wrong. So does the AHA support this? Well, absolutely it does, to be honest with you. I already told you I've read every single manual from the time or in the last 30 years of AHA. And I love to play a little game, like instead of like where's Waldo, I look for where's the statement. So what I do is I get every ACLS book that I've ever owned, and I own them all, and I look through them and I highlight the page where it says no medications have ever been proven to return to get a person to return spontaneous circulation and for them to make it out of the hospital. It's on every single ACLS manual you've ever seen. It's written in there. Now, if you want the 2020 version, all you have to do is turn to page 123 or 133. They wrote it in there twice this time, but they'll actually show you no single medication has ever been shown to actually improve out of hospital survival. Now, you say, well, that's got to be wrong. Well, if you actually look, and I mean, some of the major magazines, you're seeing that there's a lot of studies that support this. The EMS World has their September 2021 edition. They have a article that describes a research study called Paramedic 2, and with this Paramedic 2 trial, it was extensive, long lasting. I mean, the evidence is definitely there. It was well researched, well reported. They actually found out that even epinephrine created what they call neurological devastation. And I know that's hard to believe. We use epinephrine like it's going out, I'm going out, stop, hit him with another one, hit him with another one. But if you actually look, epinephrine sometimes get a pulse back, but what happens later in that recovery, in the hospital and the recovery link, is actually shows that they have twice as likely to have neurological devastation, and it occurs in over 30% of the cases. Neurological devastations. This is not minor neurological problems. This is neurological devastation in 30% of the cases. So there's a lot of other studies. EMS World today, they have in 421, they had what they call a pillars of care that talks about, these are the things we know helps and these are the things that don't. And again, they talk a lot about medication not being that supportive and actually being counterproductive in cardiac arrest survival rate. And again, this research is not meant to kind of drive through. I just want to look at the variables, what was like in our patients. And then I correlated those variables to the outside community. That's what I did with this right here on ACLS. Now, something I did not find, and there's a lot of articles on this also, but I didn't find in our research match this, is whether the placement advanced airway or non-placement advanced airway actually had any kind of outcome differences. I didn't see anything there in that data. All right, so next comes the hospital and recovery. Of the 162 that recorded, 28 survived to admission. And, on the majority of those, we did do the targeted temperature management per our protocol and some other things, but I didn't go too far actually into this. I think this was, by this time I was kind of getting data overload, and I thought this might be better for, somebody else maybe to pick this part up and maybe carry it. And there is a CARES package that does support in-hospital cardiac arrest or management in hospital cardiac arrest. I just did not enter much into that. All right. So let's talk about some other cool things that are happening right now. Well, in some places like the Twin Cities in Minnesota and Albuquerque, New Mexico, they are doing heart and lung bypass in the pre-hospital setting. So I find this really cool. What happens is dispatch receives the feedback of an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. They monitor for certain things, age, comorbidities, things that may occur, and they dispatch an ambulance that has the ability to set up a tent in the back of it or outside of it, right on the scene, and basically perform a heart and lung bypass using ECMO. All right. Now, this research is fairly new in late 2020 and late 21, but I'm hearing good things. I'm hearing these guys are getting 40% survival rates. 40% survival rates. So that's going to be huge. In Richmond, Virginia, they're doing a really cool thing with AEDs and drones. So basically, if you call 911 and report a cardiac arrest, they ask you if you have an AED. And when you don't, somebody off a building top sitting ready to go launches a drone up and they fly it over and drop the AED for you to use right on the scene. So I think that to be pretty amazing. I think that's pretty cool that that's able to do that. All right, so kind of closing this up and getting ready. I'll tell you that I believe we need to make in Soto County for improvement, and I've shared this with some of the EMS. I think we need to improve our CPR in progress. And I think we have a variety of ways of doing that. We got to get the EMS dispatchers on board. I think we need to have CPR community classes. When it comes to AED, I think we need to find a way to get AEDs in a variety of settings where they may not have been before. And I think as pre-hospital, one thing I share with them is, and the pre-hospital EMS is making sure that yeah, they're following ACLS, they're following their protocols, but remember, there is recovery here. We gotta focus on recovery. So getting them back as quick as we can, limiting the medications, keep it to your protocol, to your medical director, ask your medical director about what his thoughts are on this. And then, maybe we can help with that recovery link later on. All right. So I know I can't give you a question. So what I did here with this is I provided the link if you want to know a little bit more about CARES. It's https://mycares.net. If you would like to, talk with me, and I probably should have put that in here, but I have two different emails. I have FOITP@SOMC.org or PFOIT@shawnee.edu. If you would like to send me an email, or you could get in contact with me anyway, I'd love to share my data. I literally got it all over my desk, so I definitely could share a lot with you there, or I can help maybe dig down to individual numbers or anyway. So if you have any questions, please just give me a call and I'll be able to help you out. On the back here, these are a list of some of my references that I've extrapolated out in order to get some data. So that I'm able to kind of, you can look this up for yourself and you can kind of see what we're looking for there. All righty. Well, I do appreciate your time, and hopefully to be hearing from you.